Here we go. Hi, welcome. This is Laura from Healing with Spirit. Welcome to our next episode of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine, where we do some real talk. Let's address the elephant in the room to the growing sickness in our society, address root issues, and provide sustainable solutions. We hope by addressing the intersectionality and connecting the dots like the web of many of society's challenges, we can help you and others understand the trauma infection that impacts all of our areas of our life, including things like addiction, domestic violence, racism. We can even add our escalating inflation, homelessness, sexual abuse, chronic health issues, our skyrocketing healthcare costs, cancer, environmental issues, climate change, and more. So this is a fairly new collaborative program, and we hope to share a new perspective of solutions, healing, and resolutions. And the big thing is sometimes understanding the intersectionality of what is really the issue, and sometimes things that we don't always consider to be the root issue, and what is the spiritual medicine. Yes, we have a lot of other medicines out there, but what I find is that we have the greatest, if nothing else, a spiritual sickness that is plaguing our planet. And I'm not talking religious and religious institutions. Let's just be clear on that. This is more about the soul and the spirit, and what is it that we can, how do we access that medicine? So my guest today, I am so excited to have Lisa Jimenez. Did I say your last name right?
Jimenez.
Jimenez. Okay. She is the founder of the SheIsMe conference, and the Creative Life Happy Soul. She is an art therapist, empowerment coach, professional artist, and light worker. And her mission is to help women uncover their gifts, believe in themselves, and live life they were meant to live. No excuses, no apologies. And her life's work as a healer, creator, and transformational coach to help all women that she attracts to realize their magic and strong and stand strong in themselves and live their most authentic and abundant life. Her work in creating the SheIsMeConference expands her role in the women's empowerment, and her platform gives women around the world the opportunity to teach, empower, and inspire with the goal of making sure no woman ever feels alone. I actually just started adopting, probably because now that I'm a grandmother, the term I am a crone witch magic maker.
Nice.
So welcome. And I must say, because I don't remember saying this, but I know one of the things we're talking about in this episode, yes, that's where you are today, but you weren't always there. You were also a trauma survivor. So
yes.
Can you please just go into all that dark stuff so people get an idea of where you were? Because I think those that feel like I'm stuck, I'm never going to get out of this, there's no hope, right? I can't seem to, nobody believes me, right?
Oh,
and
nobody
I can't,
believes you.
right?
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
So can you share, even the case that's made national news, I think international news, literally that happened about a mile from my house, which is oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. the Anna Walshe case,
Oh, yeah.
And it's and how she even told authorities that he was making death threats to kill her, 10 years prior to her disappearing, right?
Right.
And I just keep saying to myself, oh my gosh, how can you actually say you love somebody? Not only just kill them, I can understand. I think we all have this ability to, one of my mentors said to me once, we all have the ability to murder. It's just, it's just what's going to be your pushing button, right?
What's your trigger? Yeah.
What's your trigger, right? And, especially if, we go, oh, I could never murder somebody. Well, if somebody's got a gun in your face, right? And you have a knife right there, you're going to just sit there and let them shoot you in the face.
No.
So it's let's just get real. But I kept thinking to myself, how does somebody actually then go to the extent you claim you love them, they're the mother of your child.
Doesn't matter.
Then you dismember them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. If you're mad enough and there's a they call it the fuck it switch, right? It's like you get to that point where it's just
Mhm.
like, I don't care anymore. That switch flips and then all hell breaks loose, right? That's just kind of like your thinking's already past the point of no return. So you feel like you've got nothing left to lose. And that's sort of where everyone sort of that goes over the cliff. That's that point.
Right. So where did you start? Like, how did you, I know we talked before off record here that,
Mhm.
like you're a survivor and you wanted to share that story because that's what led you to do the work you do today. And I would love to
Absolutely.
hear. So people need to kind of like hear, like I wrote in my books, like how I was incarcerated. People go, you were incarcerated? I go, yeah, they threw me in jail to silence my ass, right?
Yes,
Because
of course.
I thought the truth shall set you free. And I couldn't stand by a judge who was knowingly granting custody to documented pedophiles. Okay.
Right.
So, and then
Yeah.
I went into Secrets to Healing, like just my story and how I realized like that was just the tip. But like when I start to unravel, like what was the root? And then I started going back and understanding like not only did it happen like when I was a child,
Yes.
how like my dad threw a gasoline tank in the middle of the room and said, I'm going to burn everybody in,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all these things. And then where did that come from? Like, so all these patterning. So like, what's your story?
Okay. Big story. Let's see. Mom and dad both have so many issues, and that's what we have to realize is like we're taught by people who are 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 all broken in some way. We all have issues with, we teach what we know, and our parents taught us what they knew. And what I was taught was, you know, alcohol 24/7 and chaos and anger, and you raise your voice to get your way, and you use your hands to make people do what they want you to do or what you want them to do. And um, my dad was a highly functioning alcoholic until he wasn't, and you kind of knew the schedule. Like he got home, he was mad, he had a couple drinks, he was like, hey, how was your day? A couple more drinks, you could get some money out of him if you needed it. A couple more drinks, he was screaming and yelling at everybody, and a couple more, he was passed out on the couch. So somebody asked me once, why is your dad always asleep when I come over? Like, he's not asleep, he's passed out. But before the passing out, all hell broke loose, right? So when I grew up in this constant chaos, you never knew what was going to happen. So you're always on alert, you're always scared, you're always ready for the next thing, whatever that is. Like you've got a plan, you've got a plan. Like if he does this, you're going to hide. If he does this, you're going to run out of the house. If he does this, you're going to go to a friend's. And so, it's not all of my dad's fault. My mom allowed it because my mom was very much a whatever he wants, whatever he wants, that's his, you got to cater to him no matter what. So I grew up and I found
Some of that's cultural, right? Because like back in that day, like those that are say under 40,
yeah,
don't
don't get it.
understand that
Yeah,
women, like it was extraordinarily hard I mean, you couldn't even get a checking account, you couldn't get a loan,
you
you
couldn't get a
couldn't get
credit
anything,
card,
you
you
couldn't
couldn't
get
get
credit
anything,
cards
couldn't buy a
with
house.
nothing. So like yeah, our parents enabled this, right? Like,
Right. Yeah. And so again, we've come so far, but yet when we're taught this stuff, we kind of go and look for what's familiar, right? So that's what I did. I went and looked for what's familiar, found someone who did the same exact thing, and it was a freaking nightmare. Had two kids. My son was maybe 7 one day, and he said, Mom, please get a divorce. I hate him so much, but our culture and what I was taught, especially by my parents, is you stay no matter what happens. Like that's it. You've made your choice. You made your bed. Now you lie in it. Like that's the thing. And I he started my ex-husband started well, he was a drinker big time. but then he started at some point he became addicted to prescription drugs. And so he was not only taking drugs, but he was drinking just as much, if not more, and was doing the same sort of thing, coming home from work, being a tyrant, and then passing out. And, the kids weren't getting fed. He was getting meaner and meaner by the day. And there was his switch went off, his fuck it switch went off one night after I had asked for a divorce because it was getting to the point where I was in fear for my life. And there'd been a couple of points throughout the years that I was at that point, but I walked on eggshells and I made it better and I made sure he was happy what I could do. And, he was never happy, but that's another story. But, it kind of all goes together, right?
Mhm.
And so finally hit the switch flipped and he tried to kill me. My son wasn't home. My daughter was home. So my daughter has that trauma of seeing her dad trying to kill her mom, right? And again, nobody believed it could happen. Nobody, oh, we better do everything we can to help him. He was in jail. They took him away. I called his mom and said, this is what happened, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, she's calling the jail. She's getting him help. She's getting him out. She's getting him, what about me and the kids? Did anyone call and check on us that I was broken and bleeding, that my daughter was going to have trauma for the next however many years? Luckily, my son wasn't home. And when he came home, I think he was 12 at the time, 12 or 13. He said, Mom, it's a good thing I wasn't home because I'd be the one going to jail because I wouldn't have allowed Dad to do that. I probably would have killed him. And so he's got these feelings of helplessness and powerlessness that he wasn't there to help the two women in his life, and I'm
But
sure.
there are so many men and I can, off the podcast, if you want, I can give you some links of some men that were like your son that are doing amazing work in the domestic violence. They're using their voice, and I can give you, if you don't already know, I can give you resources. I mean,
Yeah, I think that'd be
it's
great.
so needed, because boys witnessing that and saying, I don't, how, they have the guilt, right? So they typically go one or two ways, right? They end up following in dad's footsteps and becoming the abuser, or they go, nobody protected my mother and I don't want that to ever happen.
Right.
And then they end up being silenced because it's the good old boys club and they don't know how to have a voice into protecting women, right? And becoming that ally.
And talk about the good old boys club, it's like, then they sent him to a anger management domestic violence program where he had to go every week. And he sat around with 25 other offenders who all shared stories of how they hurt their women. And I'm like, how is that rehabilitation? How is that doing any good? That's not doing any good. It's like sharing secrets. It's like, this is how I did it. Now you could do that. I mean, it's just cuckoo. But
we have a lot of unpacking to do in this country,
Yeah.
and I'm going to put the plug out there for those listening. This is why we need the Equal Rights Amendment. That I don't care which political party you're affiliated with, but Trump knocked it down. And unfortunately, despite Biden being the founder of the Violence Against Women Act, he has also failed to publish the Equal Rights Amendment, which would actually grant women equal constitutional rights. So when it comes to domestic violence, like I just saw that Missouri just rolled back denying women. It was funny the way they did it. They go, denying women to bear arms, meaning that women were not allowed to show their arms on the floor. They have to fully cover up.
And if they have a dress on, even if it has sleeves, they have to have a cover over their dress.
Yes.
That's part of the law too. Yeah.
And this is where we're at. And this is a call for anybody who thinks that this is wrong. Like, we can't just stand by and just keep watching CNN and stuff or keep going to social media. It is start calling your legislators. Exactly. I've learned, like, we finally got, after 20 years of work, we got, and it's not quite where I would like to see it, but it's a start. It's taken us 20 years, And I finally got politicians, 4 of them, to finally actually sit down and listen to me in the state of Massachusetts. And now we've got 4 pending bills that were just filed yesterday. 2
Yay.
were on different versions of coercive control,
Hmm.
which was smart because that way we can at least, if we can't pass one aspect, we can get the other aspect, right?
Right.
Done. And 2 versions, which we know with post-separation abuse,
Oh
is
gosh, yeah.
on vexatious litigation and litigation abuse, which is what
Hmm.
I endured. I endured 17 years of litigation abuse with no reprieve, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's a
it's
lot.
like when do you stop? When can you just move on with your life? Like
When can you get some protection that allows
that
you
too.
your freedom,
Yeah, and
right?
we're still working on the one aspect that nobody seems to want to back, and that's the dangerousness bill. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's a challenge because nobody wants to incarcerate. This isn't about incarceration, but we're looking at the Anna Walshe case, and she's not the only one. This is just in
It
my
happens every
neighborhood.
day. It happens
I
every
mean,
single day,
this is a
you know?
town that, yeah, it made national news, right? But this is a town where there's maybe been a murder one other time 20 years ago. Okay, so this is not something that happens on a regular basis,
Yeah.
and yet all the signs were there that she was in trouble. And she's not the only one. There's plenty in my area where I said the signs were there. I just heard a case in Quincy Court, Massachusetts, where the guy went for a repeated case. Yes, he was arrested, has a $15,000 bail to
Hmm.
fulfill, but he repeatedly has broken into the house of his victim and bashed her head in. And they were more concerned about him being a flight risk than whether or not he has the potential to kill her.
Right. Right.
And I'm going, there's something wrong here. Like you got your wrong priorities. This is about whether or not you're trying to prevent her from being killed.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter,
And that's why
unfortunately.
the ERA
Yeah.
needs to be addressed because the ERA would address the misogyny in our court systems.
Yes. Which we've got a long road ahead of us. I mean, that's
Yes.
definitely where we're going. We've come a long way, but at the same time, it's becoming more and more common for, and there, like you said, there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot of issues around this, right? And a lot of why are men doing this? Why are men, men need to like, and you said there's a lot of men doing the work, and there's a lot of men who need to like dig deep, but it's not a masculine thing to do. Is like look at your feelings and look why you're angry and look at your past and look, so
But I
with
think
that
I
being
think
said,
I think when you have social, I think the key is I think the reason why we actually have a rollback with women's rights comes to social media because
agree.
you have aspects of people like Andrew Tate, who
Yes.
has like, I think he had like 11 point something billion views on just 3 videos on how to rape and beat and control and enslave women.
Yes.
And he's
Yes.
doing it, the demographic is the young boys, the impressionable kids that
Right.
are
I was
thinking
sitting
this
in
is
a
improved, that this is okay.
Yeah, I was sitting in a fast food place at Christmas time, and my husband and I were on vacation and we were eating lunch, and I heard this kid talking about a girl to another boy. They were probably 16, 17, talking about just basically, breaking her up with her current boyfriend so he could have his way with her, um and then throw her away afterwards. Like he just wanted a piece of that, you know, were
Conquest.
his words. Yeah.
And I'm just going to
So
put a plug in for
mhm,
parents listening.
yeah.
Episode number 1 of Triggers in Spiritual Medicine is with my dear friend Okambo Sati, where we actually address bystander impact on teen sexual violence.
Hmm. Yeah,
Because this is where parents need to stop saying, my son would never do something like this when they're
exactly.
exposed to people like Andrew Tate.
Yes. Yes. And they think he's cool and he's got all these cars and billions of dollars and blah, blah,
He's
blah.
got billions of dollars from sex trafficking women and
Yes.
enslaving them.
Yeah. So really pay attention to what your kids are doing. I know it's hard and they get, Mom, get out of my room, and they slam the door. Tough. You know, if you don't want to say, you know, you don't want to fast forward 10 years and go, wow, my son's been trafficking women and hurting people and da, da, da. Like, what's that going to do to you? You know, that's terrible. Like, get a hold on it and take some responsibility. That's what it's all about. And that's really where I go with my work, is about taking responsibility for yourself and your actions and the people that you're responsible for.
So let's go into that. So like,
Okay.
tell me, so like, so what was the light bulb moment going through? So how did you go from like, you know, what was your healing journey, right? To like, you had this horrible experience. Your ex-husband tried to kill you and he tried to do it in front of your kids. And you're dealing with all this trauma and feeling like I know for me, like it's feeling like the very people you think you can count on are the ones that are turning your back on you, and they're enabling and trying to help the abuser, right?
Absolutely.
Like
And
I
that's
know,
exactly what helped. Even my own parents would call him and go over to his house for a barbecue afterwards.
like that,
Like,
that to me is
how
like,
is that even a thing? Like,
yeah,
they tried to kill your child, you know?
and this is where we go into like bystander, right? Like I was saying, I'm going to go back to like bystander, because the bystander abuse episode 1 would actually clue you in on how to change some of that stuff, right? And
Yeah.
how to, you're either an ally or you're enabling more perpetuation of abuse. We see
Absolutely.
this all the time. And I always say, we wouldn't have the epidemic of abuse that we have on women and children. The number one way a woman is murdered is by homicide, by domestic violence.
Yes.
So, you know, we wouldn't be having these stats if it wasn't for the bystander. The
Right.
bystander has more power to stop this from continuing.
Right. And, you know, I always say, if you see something, say something. If you hear something, say something. And I don't mean like, if you see someone trying to kill another person, call 911, of course. But what I'm saying is, if you see something, like you see bruises on my face, or you see bruises, or you see something, say something to me, so I know that I have help, that I know, because what happens, and people, you know, and this is one of my triggers for sure. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? Well, if I had tried to leave, or if I had left before what happened, I definitely would have been dead by now, because he would have tracked me down and he would have just killed me flat out, you know? So there's reasons why women
And that's
don't leave.
statistically there. Like
Yeah.
it's actually the most dangerous time for those who especially are allies that might be listening to this, right? Or might be looking at chronic illness and just are curious. Because by the way, chronic illness, diabetes, ulcerative colitis, uterine
Fibromyalgia.
fibromyalgia, breast cancer, endometriosis, ovarian cysts, I can make a list, chronic back pain, are all linked to
Yes.
unresolved, unhealed. This is where my specialty
Trauma.
is. Right.
Yep.
So I'm just going to say, look at all the other episodes where we talk about some stuff like this. But yeah, you're right. Like it's the most dangerous time. And, you know, I want to say, like, if you have somebody, like you say, you see bruises, but the key is sometimes, and I coach my clients on this, especially helping them with their friends who aren't ready. And I just say, don't get mad at them. And they say it takes an average of 7 times before, every time they say they're going to leave, it takes 7 times of leaving and going back, right? Minimum. So understand that's the cycle of abuse, because the abuser has such a grip on them financially, mentally, emotionally, and physically,
Right.
that it's going to take a lot of unpacking and a lot of support. So sometimes it's just saying, you know what, when you're ready, I just want you to know I am here for you. I know you're not ready and you're not ready to address this, but I just want you to know if something happens and you don't feel like you have a place to go or who to call, know that you can call me at any time, any place. I will pick you up. That is the best thing you can say to a survivor. I will help you.
I will help you
when you are ready.
Because the shame around it, right? We not only like how, like you just constantly think, how did I get it myself into this? How was I so stupid? How did I
Or
how did I,
why wasn't I strong enough to
why
just
wasn't I
say
strong?
fuck it
Well,
and leave?
all of those things. But then when you have kids and then you're married, and what will everybody else think? And you can't get a divorce because of your religion or
I
whatever it
actually
is.
I actually in my case, it was I thought I could handle the abuse. I thought I was strong enough that I could deal with it, and
Mm,
I was going to get help from myself, so I cannot let him so I won't trigger him so much to hurt me and my kids.
yes. Yeah. 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 That's
And
typical. Uh-huh.
I was more afraid of becoming a divorce statistic. So I would go and get
Right.
marriage counseling, and it was all about how to fix Laura. And I had two separate, the first marriage counselor actually pulled me aside and said, you're in, she's the one that told me, she's like, you're in a domestic violence situation, right? And I ended up leaving that because I
Like, what does
wasn't
she know?
ready. I wasn't ready because she saw it and I wasn't ready. So I went to another one, and it was a male therapist just out of school. And when my ex was attacking me in the middle of session, and I would say, is there a reason why you're talking to me like that? Like, I don't understand why you feel that's okay. And the therapist turned around and looked at me and said, that was equally as abusive. And I was like, what? I
Yeah.
never went back. I never went
I
back.
we went towards the end, and the therapist told me, it was an older woman, and she told me that I had everything and that I was beautiful. So I just needed to suck it up and stop complaining.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got to just add, there's a lot of wonderful therapists out there, but the one
Yes.
thing I have learned, and I highly recommend, like when I work with clients one-on-one, um, and I'm doing trauma work with them, I almost, depending on where that person is in their journey, I
Hmm.
many times will require them to have a therapist on board.
Yeah.
But with that said, you can get a 4-year degree as a
Hmm.
therapist, whether a licensed social worker or
Yeah.
psychotherapy, and have zero training in domestic violence
Right.
and trauma and how to know how to navigate that. Understanding A scores, all that stuff, and how it shows up in the body. I can't
Yes.
tell you how many therapists do not know that. So it's
Right.
highly important that if you're going, maybe this is the tip number one. If you're
Yeah.
going to get a psychotherapist, but make sure you interview them and ask them what their training and qualifications are
And you're
in
allowed
dealing with,
to,
and you're
just
allowed to,
FYI.
in
Yes.
domestic violence and trauma,
Yes.
because, and PTSD, and what are their capabilities? What can they do for you? Like, what are their skill sets?
Right.
Because if they can't help you in those particular areas, they're not the right fit for you.
Right. And then I had a male therapist who, after a few sessions, told me, I was talking about, my grandmother was a healer, and she was telling me to add certain herbs and stuff to a bath and take a bath for protection and all this other stuff. And I was relating that story in one of the sessions, and he said he would help me take a bath.
Your
Yeah,
therapist?
my therapist. Yeah. And I got up and walked out right at that point. But
Wow.
yeah,
That, I mean,
so
that right there is like, I mean, well, we see all kinds of things in the psychotherapy and
yeah,
the
yeah,
parental alienation industry, right? Where
yeah,
they say and do things and you wonder how they still have a license. Like, you
absolutely.
know.
But
So how did you
so let
get
me
from,
just tell you
yeah, go ahead. I was gonna
the
say, how did you get from like that?
well, yeah, but let me go back to that, the
All right.
woman therapist. And the point is, like, and there's a case right now, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But usually abusers are so charming, and they put on this front, and that, like, other people think that they're so great. How could they ever do that? And that's part of their
The
persona, right?
manipulation. Yep.
So yeah, manipulation. So he'd been manipulating her the whole time within those things. So he was like, you know, she loved him. She thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. So when I'm in there sort of talking about how I feel and everything else, she's like, why are you complaining? You have everything, why you have this
Sounds like a
wonderful,
therapist who hasn't done their own work.
yeah, you have this wonderful man. And I'm like, well, do you want him? Because you can have him. Um, So there's a case right now where this, you might have heard about it, the man who drove his Tesla off the cliff with his
Mhm.
family inside the car. And, all of the people are like, oh, he was so great. He was such a great neighbor. He brought everybody, flowers at Christmas time, and they always saw them out walking around and blah, 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 wonderful. Then there's another case right now. The woman is missing. They haven't found her yet, but now they find out that they talked to a friend. She had asked for a divorce. She'd been socking money away. She was the breadwinner. He didn't make any money. He was out of work. And on New Year's Day, she went missing. And so they're looking for her. They've got him in custody, but they can't really charge him with anything because they don't know. But they're
That
putting
almost
all the
sounds like the Anna Walsh case right to a
yeah,
T, right
yeah,
there.
putting
I
all the
mean, it's
pieces
like,
together. But
yeah.
it happens every single day.
And
And it
it's something
probably
that
is
media
happening.
doesn't talk about it. The media doesn't talk about it,
Right.
and if we do, we minimize it. Like the media will say, but he was so good. He did this, he did that. And it's like, you're
There's another
minimizing, he
story.
murdered his kids and
No,
family.
listen to this. There's another story. The man killed his wife, his children, and his wife's parents all at the same time and killed himself so he wouldn't get in trouble for it. And then his family wrote the obituary that he was a loving father and a wonderful husband and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, he
That's
killed
that's the
8
that's the one.
people,
Yeah. That's the
right?
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always talk about, nobody also wants to address, like, everybody, like the mass shootings at these schools, like the one in Texas, right? And
Hmm.
all this stuff. And I said, every single case of a mass shooting or a school shooting involves some form of child abuse, sex abuse, or domestic
Domestic violence.
violence
Yes.
that some judge, some police officer, or somebody in the system dismissed as they were a good guy. And she
Hmm.
was the problem, or they were the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
Uvalde, he threatened to rape how many girls? Like, there
Yeah.
was signs, and nobody took it seriously enough.
No.
And I am not a big fan of regulating guns because they're just going to find different weapons.
Yeah.
So it's really addressing the root issues. And that's why, like, we've been pushing in Massachusetts more of a dangerousness bill, because women are dying at faster rates because this whole Trump phenomena has really emboldened, and the Andrew Tate phenomena and the Johnny Depp phenomena has
Yep.
really emboldened, especially the youth, to really think women are property again,
Yes.
you know,
Again, right?
again, that we are
And then
property.
when you think of, and I've talked about this with someone not too long ago, marriage. Marriage was acquiring the woman to gain the father's riches, right?
Yeah. She was a
So
slave. She was
she was a
sold.
slave. So you find a woman who had a rich dad and you married that woman so you could get the father's money. That was
or
what
the
marriage
or
was all about.
or
Or
the
the father's
woman,
goats or the
right,
father's
or the
house.
woman was sold
Hmm.
to marry into because she had good reproductive genes to hopefully. I mean, we forget that, I forget which king it was, in England there, murdered his wives because she couldn't bear a son,
Yeah.
right? And he would
Yeah.
just keep killing his wives until he found one that bared a
Henry.
son.
Yeah. King
Henry, it was
Henry.
a Henry. There
Yeah.
you go. So it's like these things, and then I would also recommend watching the episode, I think it's episode 6, The Burning Times of Witches, on how the burning times of witches influence white women culture today, because these are all the things we're talking about. Like, where do these roots come from? Because if we don't understand the roots, we can't change them, right?
Yeah.
And I want
So
to say, especially women that are under the age of 40 aren't going to have a clue, because there's been so much cloud of hiding a lot of this information, and not too many know about it.
right.
So I would
Right.
just say, really, really kind of get school. So
And
tell me.
the modern burning is the social media bandwagon, right? So there was something that happened in my feed the other day where a woman was complaining about a product that she bought and saying that ever since this celebrity bought this product, the product had changed and it was terrible. And then somebody posted, well, no wonder she's a Satanist. And then I'm probably 800 comments. Oh, I'm never listening to her music again. I'm never, I mean, it was burn her. It was the same
Yeah,
mentality.
I
So of
I
course
I
I couldn't take it. And I popped in and said, number one, she's not a Satanist. Y'all are insane.
Yeah.
Number two, if the product changed, maybe there was needed changes, just don't buy that product. Buy a different product. Why do you have to crucify this woman? You don't even know her. And you all are jumping on this thing. I said, are we burning witches again? I mean, honestly,
I had a really visceral reaction. I don't care what Amber Heard did to Johnny Depp.
I don't care either.
I don't care. And this is the reason why. It was a defamation case, right?
Mm-hmm.
He lost in the UK and was actually found to be responsible for at least 12 occasions of domestic violence and sexual assault.
Right.
You cannot find to be, in a sense, guilty of that without proof and evidence. So
Right.
the defamation case was basically saying he never did that, right? He never abused her, right?
Right.
And the mere fact, and this is what I always say, I don't care anything else, but to me, this is the one thing that he sent a text to try to get a third party on board on saying how he wanted to murder Amber Heard, kill her, choke the life out of her,
Right.
burn her
Burn
body
her.
beyond recognition, and then fuck her corpse to make sure she's dead. I said, you know what? Just the thoughts of, and people go, oh, but he was just venting. Who the fuck vents like that?
Vents like that? Yeah,
Who vents
exactly.
like that? That's a sick motherfucker who's capable
And all
of murder.
he cared, we'll see, but all he cared about was hiring the lawyers, hiring the representation so that his name wouldn't get smeared, so he wouldn't be found out.
But what he did, and this is what's troublesome, and I'm hoping our viewers listen to this. He hired a lawyer as a shell because now you got client privilege, right? So now he can't disclose how he did it because he can just plead the fifth as privileged as an attorney. And to me, this needs to be investigated by the bar associations when you have celebrities that are hiring lawyers to actually do a campaign 2 years before trial to sway, bully, threaten. I mean, the things that people were saying about Amber Heard, I go, there's something wrong with you because I don't care who you are. You may not have to agree, but to actually wish her dead, to say you're going to find her and rape her and murder her, all these things, that speaks volumes of who you are, not
absolutely.
Who she is.
And I had a conversation many times during that trial with people saying, you don't know him. You know Captain Jack Sparrow. You know the character he's playing in a film.
And he has a history. He has a history of violence that everyone go, oh, but she did. It wasn't about whether or not she abused him. It was whether or not he abused her. And everybody wanted to flip it. Like that's the Darvo. That's the classic Darvo tactic, right?
Right.
It didn't matter if she hit him. It didn't matter any of that. It is whether or not he laid a hand on her and she had the right to talk about it. Because what that case did in Virginia is it made it more difficult for a woman to go to the police department or anybody else because all those things get published in the newspaper. And because if you do that, you can be sued. Like this is crazy.
Well, and and it's teaching
women need to start suing their abusers now.
Absolutely. Like turn a blind eye. Don't because if you go to court, if you tell on him, he's just going to get more mad. So just keep quiet and that's the mentality that we go through, right? Like he's just going to get more
I was incarcerated primarily because I wouldn't be silenced.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why on paper they put like I think on one thing they said $300. On the paper, I think it said $400. Who the hell goes to jail for 30 days with a 6-month threat of another sentence for $400 plus 6 months of criminal court community service for $400 that DOR didn't quite take out of my checking account? And I wouldn't cut him a check because he had multiple times had stolen my identity and had tried to steal. He stole his kids' accounts. Like these are things like I can just make a list. No, I was not cutting.
And they don't even listen. They don't even listen in court. They don't even listen.
It was all about silencing me. It was silencing me because I was trying to take out another judge, trying to get him to move from the bench.
Well,
That was the real reason.
I went to the family court for a custody hearing after everything went down. And the judge had all of the felony charges in front of him that were pending on this attempted murder and this, child endangerment. And he broke my phone, so that's a felony too. So I couldn't use it to get help. All of these different things. And he still granted him 50-50 custody.
That's scary. I mean, these are things that we're
Yeah.
trying to change in the law, and
Let me just tell you, I had guns in my house because, it was just a home where we had guns and went to target shooting or whatever else. And when they took him to jail, I asked the police, there were 6 policemen in my house. And I said, I have guns here. I don't want them here. I don't want him to come back and get them. And well, no, he's got a restraining order. I said, I know that those don't matter. He's like, yeah, there's really nothing we can do about it. I'm like, you can't just confiscate them and take them and hold them or nope.
wow.
And one detective
And,
came up to me.
which state was this, by the way?
California.
Do you remember which county? Do you mind saying?
Santa Clara. So one detective came up to me and said, do you have a safe deposit box? And I said, yes. He goes, why don't you take them and put them in your safe deposit box? And I said, you want me to carry weapons into a bank and put them in my safe deposit box? You actually want me to carry weapons into a bank? What logic is that? Why aren't you confiscating these? Like, he just tried to kill me. Why aren't you taking all of these? Because he didn't use one. That's why. Because
that just doesn't make sense. I mean, those are why we're trying to change laws, right, and policy. But let's go into
sure. Okay. So what happened?
How did you get from going through it? I mean, and I'm so glad you're sharing this because this really gives a backstory, right? Because I know there's so many victims out there that just feel trapped, right? They feel disempowered, and then they go down the rabbit hole and then they never come out, or they don't think they can come out, right?
Right.
And I really want to share your story, and I'm glad you're sharing all these things because these are really big things.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you don't have to end up being that story anymore, right?
You don't have to. So a couple things. You don't have to. A couple things. If you've grown up in chaos, if you've grown up with an abuser, father, mother, alcohol, drug addiction, any of those things, try and spend some time on yourself. Try and spend some time on healing. Try and recognize that if you just jump out of that environment into another environment, your choices are going to be a little skewed because you are definitely used to something. It's a pattern, and it happens.
Yes, we have to unpack the conditioning.
We have to unpack. We have to unlearn what we've learned from religion, from parents, from teachers, from whatever. I mean, I have women who tell me, this teacher told me, oh, you're never going to be an artist. You're never going to be, because she drew a cat and it didn't really look like a cat or something. And so from that point forward, she never, ever tried to be creative in her whole life because of that one teacher. So there's a lot of messages that we get growing up that influence our behavior and influence our habits.
What made you want to start to do the work you do? Like, what was the thing that kind of said, you know what, I want to do this?
Yeah, well, I started meeting other women, and I started working at or volunteering at a place called Next Door Solutions in Santa Clara, and it was for domestic violence survivors, and started working with these women, and I just wanted to help. I just wanted to be with them and like tell them that they could have a better life and that they could, and at the same time, I was working in the corporate world, and I was one of very few females in my line of work, and the patriarchal and misogynistic sort of environment that I was constantly like scraping and crawling to get anywhere, and it was more like 1 step forward, 5 steps back instead of 2 steps back. Like you just couldn't get anywhere. You're constantly battling these things like, you're blonde, you have big boobs, you couldn't possibly be smart. You couldn't possibly, I was in a meeting, I was a director at
I mean,
one of these companies.
I remember being feeling like the only way a man's going to want me is either for my body and for sex
Right?
or for my money because I was independent
Right.
and nobody's going to want me for me.
Yeah, who's like you're constantly thinking about a man and what he's going to want and how you need to act and how you need to look and how you need to, all that stuff. And I was like, ugh. So I remember sitting in a meeting, all men. I was the only woman, but I was a director. I was one of the top 5 people, you know, sort of as sitting at the table. And my boss's boss was in there as well. And he looked at me and said, "Can you take notes, please?" I'm like, half of my staff is sitting in here, but all men, I'm the only woman. He asked me to take notes. And I looked at him and I said, "Why am I the one you chose to take notes? Is it because I'm the only woman in here?" And that's the kind of conversations I had to have all the time in my line of work. And it really got tiring. And as I got
Mm.
older, I reached 50 and I was tired of fighting that fight. I was like, how long is this going to go on? And how can I get out of this, but still work with the people that I'm working with in a way? And how can I help women through this path, right? How can I help them show up, be stronger, be unapologetic, and be who they are, smart, capable, they're astronauts, they're solving world problems. And how can I guide them and help them not make the same mistakes that I made because of my conditioning and my teaching and my, everything else. So I was like, I wanted to teach art, but I wanted to teach women how to find, well, there was a couple things. Number one, and you said, here's another tip, right? Meditation. Meditation is a tip because meditation helps you quiet down and listen to what your soul is really saying to you. But you've got to learn how to listen. And sometimes it's really, really hard for you to stop. Just
Especially if you got PTSD and,
right.
you know,
It's hard for you to stop because your mind's always racing. You're always trying to find the safe place. You're always trying to be,
Mhm.
you're looking around you all the time. I know this because I've been there. So there are other ways to get into that zone than sitting there and being still. And it's through creative expression. And creative expression could be anything from painting, gardening, cooking, singing. It could be anything. But
So it's basically you're saying like creative expression, and it sounds like what you're really asking them to do is to get present.
that's exactly it. So it's all about mindfulness. It's all about getting present with yourself. And when you do that, then you can hear that voice inside of you. You don't have to sit down and be quiet and ohm it out. You can do it through another way. So because I know the triggers and the fear that you have when you've been through this and the fear that you have of expressing yourself, because when you express yourself in the realm of domestic violence, you get shut down, you get told to shut up, you get made to shut up, you don't have an opinion, you don't have a choice, you don't have any of those things. So how can I teach women, how can I help women express themselves, not be afraid anymore, and heal, right? And that's why I started Creative Life Happy Soul and doing really one-on-one and now group work, because it's wonderful to have all women who've been through the same sort of thing all together in one space, helping each other and healing each other, because you do feel very, very alone when you're going through a domestic violence situation. No one knows your secret. there's really no one you can count on that you think you can count on, right? You feel so alone and so scared. Like you never tell anybody. You don't tell anybody because of the
Mm.
shame involved with it. But imagine you're in a room with 9 other women and you've all been through the same thing, and you can all tell your stories, and you can all feel like you're in a safe space, and you can all say what you want, scream, yell, cry, curse, express yourself, and do all of these things together in a safe space. That gives you strength.
Absolutely.
That's how
I mean,
I was
women's
like,
circle, I would say women's circles in general,
yeah,
like we're
women's
going to
circles in
be,
general.
I mean, we stopped doing them for a while because I was in transition with the pandemic. And so
Mhm.
we're even going to be restarting them. And maybe we can even talk about finding a way to bring our resources
Oh, I
together
would love
to
that. I would love that.
collaborate
Yeah.
because like we're going to be redoing the women's circles starting in March, but I also run women's retreats
Yep.
once,
And we
twice a
do,
year.
right? And we do retreats as well. Because I think, I needed something like that. I needed to be able to find my tribe and find women that I could count on and that we were stronger together. Because I think, just adding you to my circle, if I was going through what I was going through, if I knew that you were an ally, I would be 10 times stronger because I'd have your strength as well.
I mean,
And
I know when I
imagine,
was going through all that stuff,
mhm,
there was nothing. I mean,
there's nothing.
even the domestic violence shelters that I was a part of,
Hmm.
they were great just to kind of get things and talk, but they were too afraid to address the elephant in the room.
Right, right.
And that is where, I felt let down, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, and then that's where I said, I think we're both in the same path of like, let's change this.
let's change this.
Let's
Yeah.
change
So,
this. And somehow my eyes watering again.
so I decided that I wanted to change this, and there were a lot of women that I've worked with in the past that weren't in a domestic violence situation, but had learned that they had to be quiet and they had to submit and they had to serve their husband, and they didn't have a choice and those kinds of things. And they were,
And there's an overlap. There's an
yeah,
overlap here,
and they
right?
weren't like in unhappy marriages, but they were unhappy
Yeah.
because they weren't being true to themselves and they weren't being who they really were. Because after all this time of playing that game and wearing that mask and all of those things that you hear all the time, it's true. I mean, that's what we do, right? We just conform. You know, after a while, things start cropping up and you're like, wow, I really like that, or I really don't like that, like
Mm.
maybe we have the same meal on Sundays. I don't even like mashed potatoes, like why am I eating that? Why am I fixing and eating mashed potatoes? I don't even like them. So it's really, you start this journey of self-discovery, right? And it's really scary because you've never done it before. You don't really know who you are. All of a sudden, all these things are popping up, and it's so much better to have a group of women that you can hold on to and be told it's okay, just try it, you're safe,
This is
it's fine.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
So
amazing.
I've
So
been doing
so
that more.
needed. So is
Yeah.
it, do you do that mostly in person or do you do that virtually?
Well, it was in person until the pandemic, and then it was all virtual, and then now it's going back to in person again. So
Gotcha.
so that's been
How did you get from that to like the conference?
okay. So that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
So then
Sorry, I didn't mean
I
to jump ahead.
no, 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 it's okay. So then, I'm helping women, I'm doing this and that, but I'm like, there's got to be a way to reach more women. There's got to be a way to help on a grander scale, right? There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. And so I started looking for places where I could speak, or I could go and tell my story, and I could go and share what happened to me, and how you could either work with me or how you could learn to tell your story too. And that's part of the creative, is like being able to tell your story, being that no apologies, no excuses, like this is who I am, this is what I've been through, and I want to tell other women so they don't feel alone. And I couldn't find anywhere that there were lots of places to speak. Don't get me wrong. There's TED, there's a lot of places that I could go and speak. But none of them want to hear the grit. None of them wanted to hear, all the stuff that I'd gone through and all the dirty bits. Like, they didn't want to hear that. They just wanted to hear, this is what I do and this is how I do it. And this is, well, I'm a survivor, and that was enough, right? I could put that out there. But I'm like, that's not enough for healing, because we carry this shame around like in a backpack. We carry our stories around all the time, and it's heavy and it weighs us down. And
It weighs us down because we're not heard, we're not seen,
right,
we're told we're liars,
right,
we're told we're bitches, we're told
right.
that we're
So we
exaggerating.
have
Oh, we're
like
PMSing,
bitches,
right?
liars,
Yeah.
PMS, shame, denial, put it all in the backpack and carry it around. And it's heavy, and it's just terrible to have to carry that around. And we shrink because of the weight of that. So how do we release that? We say it. We open up. We release it. We tell our stories. We tell all the dirty bits, and we get it out there. Because guess what? As I'm telling my story, you all of a sudden are thinking, "Oh my God, that happened to me too," right? She is me. Like, that's exactly what I went through. And how are we going to connect? How are women around the world going to connect in these times when we're scared for our lives? We have to make this web. We have to make this bond. And how do we do it? We tell our stories, and we help each other. So I woke up one morning, and I usually get my downloads right first thing in the morning. Right. I wake up, and I'm very slow to wake up because I know those messages are coming. So one morning I was waking up, and I heard this: why don't you just create your own conference instead of trying to find a place to fit in? Why don't I just create it? And I'd been being told, use your experience, use your what you know, use your experience. And then I was trying to figure out, like, what do I know? What do I, like, what do I
Right.
do? But I realized that I had been in the corporate world. I'd been in technology. I'd been in marketing for 30 years. I had done thousands of conferences, thousands of webinars. I did my very first webinar in the year 2000. So I have 23 years of experience in producing online events. I've done online trade shows. I've done in-person conferences, trade shows, road shows, other speaking events, concerts, all kinds of stuff that I've been a part of organizing and making happen. And the last big event that I did was for a big tech giant here in San Francisco, and they have a 150,000 person event every year in the city. And that was my last big thing that I did for a couple of years, helping to produce that. So I was like, that's what it meant. Listening to those messages coming in, that's what my guides were sort of telling me: use what you know. That's what I know. So what do? Produce my own conference. That way I'm helping women all around the world, making a bigger impact, helping women heal by letting them tell their stories, even all the little dirty bits, helping women by creating a network of other women who've been through not just domestic violence, but other traumatic events in their lives.
Yeah.
We've had,
I mean, I have trauma doesn't necessarily have to be domestic violence, right? I have a client that's got MS, and they develop PTSD because they're starting to lose some of their bodily functions, and they find it very embarrassing, and they struggle with that. And that is also trauma, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be I would say trauma is not always what we think.
Right. Just for example, there's a speaker whose parents died, was raised by her grandmother died, then she went into the foster system, right? So there's a lot of trauma around that. There's married 30 years, all of a sudden husband drops dead. Now what? And then finding out all of the secrets that were around, there's so many stories, and every story is unique and every story is different, yet there's always someone in the world that has gone through something similar. And so I wanted to create the conference and all the events so that I gave women a platform to not only be able to speak and tell their stories and
Mm,
unpack that load that they're carrying to be more free, but also when we tell our stories and we unload all that crap and we find each other, we're stronger and we
mhm.
feel powerful and we feel empowered and we feel like we can do anything. And when we free ourselves up for that, then we find our purpose. Then we find how we can move forward. And, I think a lot of women are all like, I don't know what my life's purpose is. Well, you might not ever know, and it might not ever be a grand thing. It might just be that you live a quiet and peaceful life. That's okay too. But
Yeah, what you're doing is so, and it's so raw, it's so pure, it's so authentic, and it's different than what we see. Like I see all like the Facebook ads and all these big names like the Shift Network. And I'm just
mhm,
in like we get drowned in that and then we lose. Like, one of the things I want to ask you, speaking of that, is like, how do you separate yourself out from that? Like, one of the things I know of what I do, what I look at is here's this amazing woman with an amazing story who's doing this, and all these other corporations are doing it for money. You got to make money, but I mean, like, it's money first, story second, right? And
right.
then they kind of water down the content, right? So, like, how do you either compete with that, or what separates you from like places like that?
Yeah, I don't compete with it because I don't even look at it as
Good.
an example or anything like that. It's just like, this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to do it. And the other thing is, I allow women to promote themselves and talk about any promotions or selling or whatever they want to do. Just ask that they are able to tell their story, because we want to connect, but we also want to be a resource for everyone, right? So I don't necessarily,
Which is
compete.
different, which is
Yeah.
so different than what is out there. This is like, I can't tell you. I mean, I was fortunate to speak at the last conference, which I didn't know I was the closeout speaker for the whole event. So, we actually did some dragon magic in the
That
end, and
was
I didn't even
fantastic.
know. But this is what it's about, right? And it's about bringing people with stories, real people, not just
Real
people like,
people.
not people like what we see that are. I think the challenge I see when I see a lot of speaking events, it's all academic and not people who actually walked the fire.
Yeah.
Academic is good. Like I always say, like if you're going to become a trauma expert, your story is one thing, and your story plus
Yeah,
training
your
makes you
experience.
now
Yeah. Yeah.
like an expert, right?
hmm
So it's
hmm
not just your story and it's not just training, it's the powerhouse of both. And I think, like we talked about, even like with therapists who go and get the degrees, but they haven't done the work,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so it's having both.
Or haven't had the experience of going through whatever they're trying to treat, because
Right.
and you see a lot of people in recovery from addiction become then recovery counselors or therapists, right? Because they've got the experience, they know what their clients are going through. And so I know what women are going through. I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life, and I've been through a lot of things in my life because I've always been the kind of person that's like, sure, I'll try it, even if it's it's like a bad thing. It's like, hey, I want to have the experience. I want to check that off. And and so I love that, now I can appreciate that I've had all of those experiences. I've had all of that trauma or all of those trials and tribulations in order to then help others because I've been there and I've done that. So, um, but the conference is great. We started with one event. We had close to 40 speakers, I believe. And they were just women that I knew that I called. I called everybody that I knew and be like, hey, do you want to tell your story? Hey, do you want to, da da da. And then I got some referrals, and, it started very, very organically and very slow. And then my good friend, Kristen Speller, she is a survivor as well, and she runs a nonprofit in Los Angeles, and she helps women, homeless women and veterans get back on their feet. And she owns a Double Down Cosmetics. She owns a organic cosmetic line. She's just a fabulous woman. She's a survivor. And we put together a survivor event in October of 2021 that was free to everyone and had quite a few speakers. It was a day long, and it was just so that you knew that you weren't alone and that you could get help, and that, you know, there were people that you could reach out to. And that's the thing with She Is Me. Like, all the speakers who come in and join us now are resources, right? So if you need help, you can reach out to She Is Me. Reach out to me, go to the website, email us, and we will put you in touch with somebody in our network that can help you, no matter what it is you're going through. So that was one of the purposes too. So how do I create a network of women to make everyone stronger together, reach a global audience? Like, I was dreaming big. Like, I wanted it to be global. I wanted to reach everyone. I wanted everyone to know that there's a resource, that She Is Me is a resource, and that you can come in, you can do workshops, you can do classes, you can do meditations, you can do, there's healing that happens within the, you know, whatever speaker is speaking. They've got healing that's going on. There's, and then there's tons of things that you can sign up to work with that person one-on-one if you want to, which is great. So that's a great way to find someone that you would never even.
Your way of collaborating is really beautiful, Lisa. I just got to say, just being on the other end and your support of the speakers and the amount of work, you know, people don't realize when you put together these things, right, how much work goes on in the back end, and you really go all out. And I just got to say thank you for all that you do, both for the speakers and for those who you're trying to reach in your audience. You know, tell me what would be like the third thing that you would recommend? What would be a good tip that somebody can do today to take with them?
I would say find an ally. Like, find someone, whether it's you or I or someone out there that you resonate with, right, that you're attracted to. And it could be a Facebook ad, it could be something. Just take one tiny little step towards that future that you want.
And find a community. That means also finding a community, right? Because I'm finding that this year especially is really about finding community again.
Absolutely. And so I think, and you don't have to just do it today, like go and find that community, but start listening, start investigating, start asking. Asking is a really good thing. Ask people, what podcast do you listen to? What, you know, who's your mentor? Who do you like to work with? And you might not resonate with me or, you know, with Laura, but we know lots of people. And, you know, you can go to the She Is Me website. You can check out all the speakers. You can say, wow, her face looks really nice. Let me see what she does.
Or you can comment below and we can answer and leave the info behind. Comments, likes, shares. I always forget, and follow are really important.
Absolutely.
Because we're all in this together, right? This is all collaboration.
But I think just that one tiny little thing, it doesn't need to be a commitment. And I think that's one thing that we're really scared of. Yeah. Is that we need to make a commitment, whatever it is. But even if you did make a commitment to something, everything is temporary, and you can always change your mind and say, nope, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
I think if you're going to make a commitment, more than anything, is make a commitment to yourself.
Yes.
Make a commitment to yourself that, you know, I know, being diagnosed with complex PTSD, that there were days that I would say, yes, I want to do this, but then I would wake up and my nervous system would say no, you know, and so I would need extra rest. And instead of beating yourself up when you have those days, just say, today is just not the day, and start again tomorrow.
Yes. Right. You know? And it's okay. It's okay to take care of yourself and just be. You don't have to produce anything. You don't have to have any expectations of yourself or even meet anybody else's expectations. Like, just know, I'm going to sit here. I'm going to enjoy a cup of tea. I'm going to watch a movie. I'm going to just be, and that's okay.
So what would be the best way for folks to find you?
Well, you can find me at the SheIsMeConference.com. You can find me at creativelifehappysoul.com. And you can find me on Instagram at both those places, Facebook at both those places. The She Is Me Conference Facebook, there's a page and there's a group, and the group is private. It's women only. You can come in there and just know that you're safe. There's nothing else can touch you in there. It's just really, and everybody is kind and nice, and we don't put up with any, any crap, because if you come in here and start crap in the group, you're just not going to be part of the group because you've got some stuff to deal with. And excuse me.
And there is a group for survivors that might be going through challenges.
Yeah.
There is a Facebook group. It is we try to do the best we can with vetting with all the spam and things.
Yeah,
sometimes
it's
hard.
not easy. Yeah.
So, but we if it is a protective mothers for family court reform in Facebook. But again, like we said, we try to vet. So make sure that when you go in and you answer the questions appropriately. So we try to create a safe environment the best we can.
Yep. Yep.
And it's still not 100% safe. I just got to say, because stalkers and abusers always find a way, because my abuser and my stalker created 5 fake Facebook accounts just to befriend me, saying that they were a colleague, and then they knew who was on my friends, because sometimes when you accept friend requests, right, like you get to see who's joined. And they ended up friend requesting people that I know that I worked personally with, and it was quite frightening, so
they're sneaky.
It's hard when they really have a will. So I just got to preface that because safety is important as well. But we do the best we can, but it's not 100% guaranteed.
It's not 100%, but I do literally every single person who asks to join the group, I go in and look what other groups they're members of. I look at every single one, because I'm just not going to say, okay, you can join the group, and then you're in there stalking people and you're being obnoxious.
Yeah, especially if they're not a new group. I know survivors sometimes create new Facebook pages, but then that's when you maybe want to private message us and say, hey, I know I have a new account. This is why, and I really want to be a part of this group. Right. And then that's how we can work around that,
Exactly. So, but I think the easiest way is Instagram. She Is Me Conference. That is where all the stuff for the conference is really happening, posting, and follow us. We'll follow you back. We love to promote you as well. So if there's something that is happening with you and you just want to scream it to the world, let us know, and we'll post it on our page, and we'll help get some recognition. And we want to lift you up as well, because we're tired of everyone pushing us down. We're tired of that patriarchal nonsense of women are less than, and that we need to stay down below, making everything happen while everybody else gets the accolades. I mean, everyone can relate to that, right? Like, we are all working our asses off, and then somebody else gets the credit. So we want you to get credit for what you've done, and we're ready and willing to be your cheerleader and help you and lift you up. So let us know if there's a way that we can help you in that way. We also have sponsorships. You can, if you're a women-owned business, you can sponsor the conference and get your name out there to all of the people. This is important, because this is something that I really want to, we're in the process of building, but I really think will be a great resource. If you have a story and you're not a speaker, you don't want to speak, you don't want to show your face, you don't want to be out there, but you have a story and you think it's important that people know your story, you can tell your story. We have a section on the website called Storytellers, and you can tell your story, submit it to us. It can be written, it can be a video, it can be audio, it can be a poem, it can be a song. It doesn't matter how you express it, however you want to tell it, we will put it in our storyteller section. So we're hoping at some point we'll have thousands of stories that all can be indexed. So when you have an issue or you have a question or are having a problem and you feel alone, that you can go to the site and go to the section of how you're feeling, and you can see that you're not alone, that there are other women that have been through it and have resources for you if you need it. So we're working on that right now, but that is a dream of mine as well.
Well, thank you so much. And for those who follow us, make sure you follow, there will be a linked tree link to all the stuff that I do with Healing with Spirit, whether you want to book a session, podcast links, all the social media, but also for those who have an interest in the pending legislation. I haven't added them yet, but I will by the time this airs, hopefully, of what's happening in Massachusetts from a legislative and policy standpoint. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, make sure you like, follow, share. The only way we succeed is by engagement by you. So, and make sure you leave your feedback. Thank you for joining us. Until next time on Triggers in Spiritual Medicine.